Now, I want you to experience an opportunity where you're going to be actually eavesdropping in on a conversation between 4 executives. Often this is very highly rated in our evaluations because it's a chance for you to just really hear what's it like to be in those roles and how did they get there. So about to join me on stage in just one moment, if you will, very first and foremost is going to be Mark Jefferson is going to come out and join us, Vice President of Human Resources from TransLink. We're also going to have Armita. I should have definitely clarified how to say your last name, Armita. I'm going to apologize to you in just a moment here. Alikhani, who is the Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer for BlueShore Financial, and Kavie Toor, who is the Managing Director, Athletic and Recreation, the University of British Columbia. So please join me in welcoming all of them to the stage. Come on up. Kavie will have you right here. Armita, my sincere apologies. Please share with me how to say your last name properly.
Armita Said Alikhani.
Armita. Say it again for me. I'm going to get it right.
Armita Said Alikhani. I've condensed my name.
There we go. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mark, glad that you're here as well. And so as we take a look, this is something that is my developmental opportunity. I just want to own it. You know, names are so important, and I've struggled today, and I'm not sure why I'm struggling today, but I will own it, and I will practice, and I will get better and better all the time. But aside from that, I want to know who you are and what brought you to our stage today. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey that you've taken to get to the current role. And maybe if we could, Mark, can I start with you, and we'll work our way down?
Sure.
Thank you.
Start with the worst, get to the best. Why don't we try it that way? I'm actually in human resources for probably formally the last 20 years. I started out as a teacher at UBC. That's where I took my training. That's where I did my undergrad degrees. I did my undergrad degrees in urban planning and human kinetics. So figure out how a guy who takes human kinetics and urban planning gets into HR. Well, there's a journey. A good friend said to me, you're going to school to learn how to run and learn where to run to. So that was the joke on me early on. I became a teacher. I taught in the classroom, in a high school classroom for a number of years, and then worked into senior administration in a school district in the Lower Mainland. I then actually came to TransLink as a director of organizational development and labor relations, and then I left TransLink and went into local government. I then transitioned to healthcare, and I am a boomerang employee, is what I understand now is the terminology, because I came back to TransLink. And I love it, and I just wanted to give a shout out to the team because I love working with this team, and they sort of put jazz in my step every day, so I appreciate them.
Awesome. So glad you're here. Thanks so much, Mark. Yeah, there's your team. There's your team. Armita, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got here today.
Sure. Similar to Mark, if you asked me 20, 25 years ago where I'd be today, I would not have guessed where I am from a career perspective. I, even as a child, was really interested in helping others, particularly in the international development realm. So I studied just that, international development and communications at SFU. Went off to Toronto, was going to apply for law school, journalism, that kind of thing, and I was volunteering with not-for-profit UNICEF Ontario. And on my first day of volunteerism, I met the communications director. And that's somehow was meant to be, and I took a pivot, went to a postgrad for communications, took a job in a PR agency in Toronto that specialized in tech, did some work for Microsoft, Avaya, and a number of other global tech companies, and then moved back to Vancouver and worked for tech startups, mid-sized tech companies for about 10 years. Really wanted a challenge, wanted to do something new and learn something new, so I pivoted into finance. It's been a decade of that now. Been at BlueShore for about 6.5 years. Started in a kind of communications role. It's evolved into corporate affairs, community giving, ESG, and strategic planning. And it's been an amazing, fun journey. And who knows where it's going to take me in 10 years from now.
Wow, that is impressive. Hello. Yeah. And where's the BlueShore team? Yes, recognition. Thank you. Yes. So proud to have you here. And Kavie, what about yourself?
Yeah, Mark and I actually shared a bit of a story of that. A lot of our career pivots were around an education degree. None of us actually got into formal teaching, but that's where I'll start my story is that I had finished graduating a couple degrees, was ready to become a teacher, coach, potentially a principal, following in some family footsteps, and wasn't really feeling like that was my passion, but that's where I was headed. And my girlfriend at the time, wife now, who's here, had got offered a job, and she's like, I don't think this job is for me, but I think I might know someone who might be interested in this role. And it was running sport events at the university, and it's funny how that just one pivot had shaped my career path. And subsequent to that, I've had 3 or 4 pivots where I've almost left the university, but there was an opportunity to teach, so I stuck around. Then there was an opportunity to work on as the university lead with the Olympics and with the building there, and then there was another opportunity to join the board of governors. So I've been really lucky to sort of have all these great experiences. And so the role itself is comprised of overseeing 26 varsity teams. We do have, I'm sure there's some UBC and SFU grads. There's Shrum Bowl tonight up at SFU. So if you don't have a ticket yet and have a good car, come on out, check it out. It also includes the recreation and well-being program. Also includes a business portfolio where we run a lot of concerts and camps at the campus, and all the other administrative functions as well. And so what really gets me passionate about the work in particular, it's not only the work itself, but how sport can be a powerful tool, a tool for reconciliation, a tool for advancing EDI, and many other things. So yeah, that's my path. Thanks, Bill.
Oh, Kavie, thanks again, and appreciate you joining us today. Armita, I'm going to come to you first here, if you would. Given that we're here at the Art of Leadership, what do you believe are the most important attributes of successful leaders today?
I think cultivating team is critical, particularly the space we're in right now with remote work, hybrid work, the difficulties in Connections have been a challenge for many within organizations, so that's really critical. Understanding your team members, some of the speakers earlier alluded to this, taking the time to ask the questions. You actually just mentioned that, Bill. Ask people, what exactly did you say?
And what accomplishment are you most proud of?
Yeah, because through that you get to understand what motivates people, what gets them excited. And with that, you can provide them opportunities and open doors for them accordingly. Other things are to be able to provide a clear strategy, to know what the objectives are, to get on the same page so that you can move forward on the same path, and motivate your teams accordingly.
And that one's really critical for me, Armita, because too often the senior leadership team is touting the strategy, the objectives, and the individual contributors are like, I don't do any of that any day. And so, as leaders, I think that communication is absolutely critical to really make sure that they can connect their daily behavior to the highest strategic objectives of the organization. Because otherwise, it's like, do they even know what's going on in our world down here? So really interesting. Kavie, did you have any additional thoughts about that?
Yeah, Armita covered some good ground, so I think I'll cover a new topic. And I'd say, for me, it's certainly listening with intention. And often it's not just being a bobblehead, which I often am, but also it's around how do you actually find ways to ask the right questions of the right people and actually intake that feedback. I got a bit of a story. We were aiming at the university. We had 2 male varsity directors. One had left the university, and so we were looking to have our teams, our women's teams. We wanted to fill that role with a female lead. So I at that time had thought, let's find a way to just post it open for female leaders, make it an attractive posting, and be real intentional about that approach. But from talking to members of my team, they said, Kavie, we don't want you to do that because then that hire is always going to be known as that's how they were hired, and they may not gain the respect and trust. So we think you should hire a female, but we think you should hire them because they're the best candidate. So that's something where I came in with one idea, but I was listening and got some feedback, and it required a different approach. So certainly listening intentionally is a big part of being a good leader, I think.
Wow. For me also, as I hear that, it's really about creating that psychological safe space for your people to tell you, you're wrong, and here's maybe a better idea or a better strategy, something else we could take on. So congratulations on being candid enough and courageous enough to share that story with us today.
I should say we hired a female too. That's an important conclusion.
Just want to add a comment to that, Bill, because it strikes a thought. Is what we're all seeing is a more bold employee coming into our businesses and areas, and so perhaps prior to COVID and people retreating where they can to work remotely, and of course there's operational people who have been on the front lines throughout for the past 3 years, but actually a more bolden perspective of employees willing to raise issues, willing to be outspoken many times too, and how do senior leaders reconcile with that? Because in the human resources area, we're always navigating in that space, but other leaders who aren't as engaged, perhaps at the senior level, perhaps not, just on the front lines too, how do they actually respond to those people? And making sure that, because of a generational shift is what we're seeing, is people are not shy of sharing their opinions and being, like I say, outspoken and raising their concerns to the senior management.
And for the very first time, really solidly in business now, we have the perfect storm of 4 full generations working together. So it is interesting to see that diversity and how we maybe speak up or don't speak up.
It is one of those challenges because you see the boomers as they exit, and the Xers, I'm an Xer, and it's a foreign landscape in many regards for many leaders. And so you've got the senior administration in most businesses, and they're looking at younger employees who are 2 or 3 years in, speaking about concerns and what the business should be doing, et cetera. And it's good conversation. It's raw, it's out there in many senses, and it has to be addressed.
Yeah. If we don't know there's a problem, we can't fix it, right? And so how do we create that space? How do we create that space? Armita, I want to come to you with this next question, please. Having just come out of one of the most challenging times, it looks as though we're headed into another one, with fears of a looming recession, high inflation, general economic instability. What do you foresee as the biggest challenges facing organizations? And what can leaders do for our employers and employees during these turbulent times that we see ahead?
Yes, definitely uncertainty has been the key word. Someone said the most used words have been, you're on mute, but I think uncertainty and unprecedented were also up there. But there's more of it now with the economic outlook, with inflation, all of the factors that you outlined, and Eric spoke to this earlier as well. So with that, it's being as informed as possible. Admitting when you don't know, and trying to provide the certainty that you can to employees, to your teams, to your organization, and having empathy. Everybody deals with change very differently. Everybody deals with uncertainty very differently, and that's something I personally had to learn myself. I have been through a lot of change throughout my life. I changed schools a lot, so for me, change is very exciting. I get super pumped about it. I look forward to it. But I actually had to learn that not everybody perceives change that way, and had to adapt my management style, my communication style. And so that's something as leaders we have to be aware of and bring that empathy in every day.
So maybe just to dig a little bit further into that, if I could, because I hear this often, I needed to adapt my management style or my leadership style. Are there some examples that you can give us around how, any of you, about how you adapt your leadership style and or your management style, if you will? Any thoughts about that come through? That's off the book, and I'm putting you on the spot. I don't mean to do that.
I mean, some of it is based on people's desire for change is different. I've got a fairly new team where everybody's got they're very strong in various aspects of what they specialize in, but everybody's very different. So even something as, again, with change, or how they want to be challenged, what they want to take on. Everybody's motivated in a very different way, and some are able to run with the change and it gets them excited. Others need to have time to process and absorb. So I need to be very cognizant of that, not look at that as a weakness, work with it. And it can actually be a strength, the person that needs to process and think it through and ask all the questions versus the one who's quick to action and will dive in. Each will have advantages that they bring to the team, and I need to work with them accordingly.
Yeah, and so hence diversity, equity, exactly. Not equality. So we don't treat everybody the same. What I'm really hearing is that you really personalize your approach in leadership and or management to the individual rather than treating everyone the same. Thank you. Wow.
It's hard. I try. It's easy to think your way is the better way because it's easier then, right? But no, you try.
Yeah, well, and that's the interesting thing. You know, I was raised by the golden rule. And that's do unto others as you would have done to yourself. And it wasn't until my mid-40s that I realized how disrespectful that really is. Because it's assuming that people want to be treated the same way I want to be treated. And so now, you know, as a bare minimum, you know, if I'm working with individuals in a service capacity or whatever, I would never treat anyone less than how I want to be treated. But I've elevated from the golden rule to the platinum rule. And I treat people the way they want to be treated. But what I'm hearing is that you really need to learn and get to know each one of your individual contributors or your people that are reporting to you and how they want to be treated. Who needs more time to think? Who can think right off the cuff? So those are some brilliant tips. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Kavie, I'm going to come to you next here then. You know, we launched The Art of Leadership, and the team launched The Art of Leadership during the 2008 global financial crisis. And they know here at The Art of Leadership firsthand that learning and development budgets are often the first to go. We often hear that people are our organization's best asset, but as budgets get tighter, What can organizations do to further develop our leaders when we need them the most?
Well, it's a great question, Bill, and I think I applaud you and Chris for doing workshops like this, because I think time to reflect and invest in ourselves is really one of the most important things we can do. I've got a colleague, Matt Corker, who's here, who's doing some of this work with our team, so he's very, very relevant around the investment of time. So we recently did some workshop with our executive team around just better understanding a lot of the works around sort of personality tests. We in particular did the Marcus Buckingham work, and I think just investing and learning more about one another, because often we're just so busy with the sort of the order of the day and the tyranny of the now. That ability to take the time to actually learn more about one another is so valuable, and it's such an easy lesson to forget because you just get used to the operational side of things. But getting to know your colleagues, getting to know your staff, getting to know the people in your organization better can only lead to enhanced working environment and finding a way to work through some of the difficult challenges that we identified earlier today with some of the other speakers.
So other than just structured, talent development initiatives, if you will, training and development historically, Mark, are there things that you're doing at TransLink that are other than classroom type training? Are there other opportunities there?
There are actually, to Kavie. So we've actually partnered with UBC Sauder School of Business. So we started a year and a half ago in planning and working with the Sauder School of Business for all our leaderships. Now, TransLink is a company that you know as TransLink, and you see buses and you see trains and you perhaps see transit police and transit security. So we have 4 companies. We have TransLink that has approximately 1,000 employees. We have BCRTC, which is the SkyTrain, which has 1,200 employees. Coast Mountain Bus Company is the biggest employer, approximately 5,500 employees. And then Transit Police has about 400 employees. So we have 4 companies that work together as an enterprise, is what we do. We've actually created a supervisory manager, director, executive leadership program with UBC and partnered with the Sauder School of Business. So I know that's classroom learning, but we also extract from that and take that out and apply that with our leadership competencies, which we're developing in our workplace across the enterprise. And of course, there's nuances with it because you've got operational companies and then you've got corporate sides of things as well. So we work through those challenges together. We still do our regular presentations and learnings like we would do any training, so sitting in classrooms, but we are trying to move into that space and more authentic teaching and learning, if you will. Teaching never leaves my soul. It always comes back to that, but actually working with the HR team and leadership teams and actually training other employees.
Beautiful. So, there are so many opportunities that we just don't always think about them if they're not in the classroom or in a conference even, if you will. And so, just looking and listening, Armita, about how your career has evolved over it, must have been chances to job shadow. Maybe it's just leading a project. Maybe it's leading just simply a team meeting and just getting those opportunities to step up in your own leadership. And so really look for those opportunities to learn and develop and to grow. And even if it's through reading a magazine or being a part of an association, so many chances for us to really not just wait for a classroom initiative, not that they're not valuable, and we certainly want to keep investing in those things rather than pulling back, especially at this time. But that one takes me back to another sort of situation that's going on in the real world, Mark. And that, the pandemic has brought many changes to organizations, from the Great Resignation we heard a bit about, from quiet quitting. What are some of the struggles that your company has faced? And what are some of the positives that have emerged from this transformative time that's been going on?
So I think I'll speak on behalf, of course, of TransLink, but it's not something that's foreign to anybody in this area, whether you're in human resources or not, and that is finding the best talent. I know it was referenced earlier this morning, of course, but everybody's looking for the best talent. It's a competitive market in whatever industry you're in, and those are the challenges right now. For example, we have an attrition rate of approximately 11% of our 8,500 employees, which by outside standards is not bad, but by inside standards, it's unprecedented for us. We're typically down about 5 or 6% for us. We presently have over 300 vacancies in our organization. We have an IT division that has a 33% vacancy as they vie for, as a public sector company, try to actually compete with the private sectors that can obviously offer greater compensation packages and such. So it is an extremely challenging time. I would say, I can comfortably say on behalf of any public sector organization. So those are the challenges. What it has spurred us to do is think a little laterally, think differently, build out our EVP, our employee value proposition, look for things such as training. Having a leadership development program is just one example. We are trying to develop a coaching culture. which could be on the maintenance floor. It could be in an executive accounting office at the same time, mentorship programs. But what attracts people to our industry? Obviously, right now, there's a great sensitivity and awareness for green initiatives and having the fossil fuels that's impacting our climate. So that's an area that we as an employer are not exploiting, but we're drawing attention to people. You can be part of the change. You can actually be part of it, whether you're actually in an accounting division, a human resources division, or out on the road as we look to new technology. So those are the areas that we're focusing on.
Wow, I'm sure many of the leaders in this room would go, seriously, an 11% attrition rate? Like, I would take that. I would take that. But in your industry, that's just not common.
That's right.
Okay, wow. Armita, I want to come to you next if I can. And corporate culture is one of the most important factors that drive performance and innovation. What is your organization doing to ensure that the culture really remains its competitive advantage in finding new ways to succeeding in this ever-changing world that we're just talking about?
Sure. Let me give you a little bit of background on BlueShore and the culture, and it's relevant to where we are today as it relates to culture. So BlueShore is a credit union. We have been in business for about 80 plus years. It started out as a traditional credit union, serving the local community, very community-based. About 20 years ago, the CEO decided to shift things. It was a new CEO. Our first speaker referred to the idea of being willing to be the joke, was it that he said? So he had this concept that the credit union is going to be offering premium service. The branches were going to be redesigned to reflect the experience of a Four Seasons hotel, and they were kind of trademarked as financial spas. And of course, to many, it was a joke idea, and they laughed about it, and it was implemented. It's actually been in place now for 20 years. It's been a success. But one thing that our CEO and the leadership team at the time learned is that you can have a strategy, you can roll it out, but for successful execution, you can't do it with the right culture. You can't do it with buy-in from your employees. The strategy can be amazing, but if it's not being executed by people who are passionate about it and doing it with feeling, it's not going to succeed. So that buy-in into corporate culture became part of the overall strategy. So at BlueShore, culture has become something that's from the top all the way across. It's not something that looked at, as is in some organizations, unfortunately, as something that's only the job of HR, because it isn't. The culture is something that HR helps us foster, but the employees live it, breathe it, and they are the culture. So we have that top down across diagonal buy-in, which is fantastic. So that's helped us through the pandemic and the challenges that everybody's been facing. What we've been doing also is just evolving that culture in the past several years, taking the opportunity. There's been a lot of social justice movements. There's been different desires from employees, multi-generations coming into the workforce, and what the boomers may have been motivated by might be different from other generations. So we're taking a listening approach, doing, other than the annual employee engagement survey, there's pulse surveys throughout the year, really listening to what staff want and implementing those things. We've done DEI training, unconscious bias training that started at the board level. All of our executive team, senior leadership team have been through diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So these are just some of and employee well-being has just been top of mind in terms of programs that we've been offering in the last several years.
Wow, which is again really highly commendable, if you will, because even our conversations at lunch today, we were suggesting that not everybody was physically going to be ill from COVID. However, we were all going to be struggling with some mental challenges over this environment, whether it is anxiety, whether it's claustrophobia from wearing masks, whether it's just fear of getting sick. And so to know that there's addresses that are being done to mental health issues is really, again, honorable for all of us. You really tapped into a bit of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So Kavie, that brings me to a question for you, if we may. Earlier today, we heard about DEI and that it leads to more empowered and innovative organizations. What barriers are organizations facing in providing an inclusive workplace, and what strategies can leaders put in place to progress?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bill. I think the barriers are well known. Some of the speakers covered them today, and the barriers of awareness of opportunities, creating opportunities throughout the organization so that it isn't decisions just at a time of hiring. I've been on a number of interview panels where we have a strong desire to bring in and factor in EDI in the hiring process, but that's too late in the process. So what are some of the barriers for getting people of diverse backgrounds into the role? A little bit of a fun fact for me, when I started my role at UBC, I got flipped an article 2 months after I'd started to say CBC was doing an article around athletic directors in the country. There's 56 of them, and they said based on a scan, there's only one who's not white. I was like, I'm like, shit, that's me. But wasn't even really aware of it. But in terms of what can organizations do, I think it's when those moments arrive. Everyone's got a statement, everyone's got values, but when the moment arrives, how can you back up your talk? And so that's what people will notice. They'll see what you do, not what you say. And I'll maybe got one quick story here. We had an incident where we had a coach who was tweeting some negative things a few years back around, I think the tweet was retweeting something that Black Lives Matters was a leftist lie. I know that's sort of like, and there's lots of like history behind there. So typically at universities, what you should do is you should have, a meeting, investigation, months time passed. And so, we in that scenario moved pretty quickly and pretty decisively because that's what our community demanded in that environment, to say, if you're truly going to value EDI, then here's a moment where you actually need to back it up. So there's some personal risk in that scenario to say, well, we're not going to follow the normal policy, but we think backing up the values that our organization and team needs is what's more important at that time. So I think in those moments, and we all have those moments, how do you sort of stick to those values versus perhaps linking into with too much with the institutional approaches, which is hard. It's a hard balance.
One of the things I wanted to comment on, if I could too, is it touches upon both the previous comments here, is our ERGs. So we've developed over the last couple of years our employee resource groups. We've got a very strong pride group. We've got a very strong living caregivers, and what that refers to, of course, is for parents, young parents with children, and they're trying to balance the challenges with work and young children at home, as well as taking care of elders. And so those are just a couple of examples. So our whole EDI area is becoming more of an open, transparent conversation is what we've actually moved into that space, as well as, and we're growing, we're maturing. You're never there. One is never there, but you have to have those conversations, of course. And then our psychological health and safety. That's another focus that we've had over the past couple of years. So, of course, it started out with the conversations on how people are doing through the pandemic and then vaccination mandates and all those kinds of things and masks. And now it's going to mature into a space post-COVID, hopefully, within the next little while. But it really is, at the end of the day, it's about working with all of our employees, everybody, to make sure everybody's okay.
And that's such a powerful question that Eric was talking about as well, right? Checking in with your people, not checking on your people, and really just, are you okay? And that used to be a question that before COVID we used to ask in the hallway all the time, and we just sort of walked past each other, not even waiting for a response. Now it's so important that we do just pause and really get a little bit of eye contact if that's appropriate, and just say, no, how are you really? Really, how are you? So, Armita, can I come to you for this next one? What have been the best leadership lessons of your career? And what has helped you get to where you are in your career today, would you say?
I would say to be open, to be curious, and to be courageous. When it comes to openness, being open to new ideas, being open to testing and learning, being the experimentation that was referred to earlier. Being open to being challenged, to feedback, to trying new things. And then with being curious is learning as much as you can. If I can give that piece of advice to my younger self, to anybody, I would say that's the best investment that you can make, is learn as much as you can. And that's the best thing you can do for your organization too. And that's putting your hand up for new projects. So it's not just courses, it's not just conferences, as you mentioned, Bill. And also being open to getting to know your team, being open to their feedback, to the changes they want to see. And then in terms of courage, I would say being courageous enough to take a chance on somebody else. If you're in a position to empower somebody else, to sponsor somebody, take a risk, give them a stretch project, beyond a stretch project, promote them, and stand behind them and support them through it. and speaking up, having the courage to speak up. So right now in the global landscape, we see that there's a lot of unease and unrest. We see in Iran right now, there is young girls and women as young as 15 are standing up for freedom of speech and human rights, and they're losing their lives. But here we live in a beautiful democratic country, not perfect, but one of the best. We have these rights, so speak up in a corporate setting, in any environment. If you want to see change, there are no saviors. Make the change, ask the questions, make the requests, lead by example, and that's what's worked for me. Beautiful.
And not only that, but you actually wear it not on your sleeve, but on your heart almost today. Will you share with others what your pin says?
It says Woman, Life, Freedom.
Yeah. It's time, absolutely. And so, Kavie, did you have some thoughts about that question as well? Is there anything you wanted to add to that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I would use I'm not one to use often quotables, but for this question, I think a quotable is appropriate. And this is from one of my mentors. Every person has a passion waiting for a cause. And it's our job as leaders to help them match up with their passion. So I just love that. I was at a student athlete graduating event, and it was just really powerful to hear some stories. You had one person who was working with regional planning with Indigenous communities and was doing great work in their 1 year post-grad. One person who was helping find cures for COVID was doing great research. One person was selling mushrooms, the medicinal, good, healthy kind. But people were finding their passion, and those are good stories. But there's lots of people who don't have those, who finish their university career in our environment, or even some of our employees who don't necessarily have those opportunities. So what can we do as leaders to create opportunities for them to grow, to learn, to experience things, so they find their cause that their passion matches up to?
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now, there's been some doom and gloom in these questions today. And so, Mark, if I can open with you here, first of all, as we look at leadership moving forward, what are you most excited about?
First of all, I'd like to comment on why you came to me for doom and gloom.
No, our conversation today had some doom and gloom financially and people leaving and the great resignations.
I'm just joking. We have, if we back up to the early March of 2020, when COVID was coming down the road towards us, it shows you how a big machine like our company and our companies can navigate quickly. So we were able to put 1,500 employees approximately into a remote space, keep the buses and trains moving for the public, and do that. Yet if we had have gone through a typical business cycle, that perhaps would have taken us 5 years. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is to move people into that virtual space. So people can be agile when they want to be, whether you're following the agile methodology or not, or just moving it in unison together. So I think that, to me, that's inspiring for us as a company, because we are very thoughtful, we're very process-driven, which takes time. And so that's one thing. So I think for me, I'm really excited about the future of work. We've moved into this space of, we have 85% of our employees are resident. They're the transit operators. They're the SkyTrain attendants you pass on the platform. They're the folks running the trains. But we have about 1,500 employees that we work with who are hybrid or remote, and we're figuring it out, like you are. Any of your employees, there is no rule book. We find some things better, and people talk about best practice. There's better practices, but it has to be the right practice for your business and to keep your business moving. So that excites me, because things are not scripted, they're unfolding, and we're gonna come up with our own solutions and learn from others.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Kavie, what about your thoughts? What are you excited about? What do you look forward to?
I think the thing I'm excited about is that will we see a pivot and a switch from our society that's so dependent on tech, phone society? I feel like people are valuing sessions like this, where we can connect in person, and I think we saw the impact and damage that sometimes too much screen time that can have. But I think there's going to be a societal switch. I was having a conversation on this earlier, is that I wonder if it's going to be cigarettes in bars soon enough, where there'll be a pushback. So I'm excited about that, because I think that's sort of something that we all need. We need to have more direct conversations face to face.
Excellent. And Armita, I absolutely wanted to share the last word with you. So please, what are you excited about?
I just have to clarify something. Did you say you're excited about cigarettes and bars? I don't think that's what you meant. So
I know
just wanna...
that was no, definitely not. It's going to be like
Okay,
cigarettes
good.
in bars that they were really commonplace and now they're not. But thank you.
I thought so.
I want people looking at me
Didn't
like
want
that's
anyone walking away
strange way
thinking
to
that.
finish. Strange way to finish.
I have to protect my new friend here.
Thank you.
Yes, similar to Mark, I would say it's the disruption that's to come. As I said earlier, I love change. So I'm excited for that. And I think it was Yasmin that says it's about leaning into discomfort. I'm excited about leaning into that discomfort. I have a new team at BlueShore. I joined the executive team 6 months ago, so I'm in a new team there as well. So it's an amazing team. I'm in awe of them every day with what they bring to the table, the passion that they have. So I'm excited to face the uncertainty with them and come out of it even better and stronger.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. You give me hope. You absolutely give me hope for the future. So I don't know what it was like for you. I certainly am learning and growing without question. And that was our time having an eavesdrop on a conversation between 4 executives. So thank you so much for your courage to come up and be on the stage with us today and sharing your wisdom with us. You give me hope for the future. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes. Wow. So thank you so much. Oh, up top, and thank you so much. Cheers.